Okay, so I'm going to recap a presentation I'd made last night for the Ministry of Testing in Edinburgh, and it's specifically on an open source piece I've made called Servirtium and how it can be used in Service Virtualization and TCKs, which is a concept I'll come to 3/4 of the way through this presentation. Anyway, thanks to Ali and Craig for organising and Royal London for hosting. So I'm Paul Hammond, ex-ThoughtWorks, a lot of things. US and UK mostly in the last 20 years. I've been in the test mercenaries team of a ad and search giant in California. I'm the Selenium 1 co-creator, dependency injection pioneer, and many more things that I could list but won't. And currently I spend a lot of my time consulting for corporates that might need help getting to trunk-based development in order to release faster, with less defects, and one could say this is a niche of DevOps consulting. Right, so the problem you're trying to solve. You have unit tests, you've made these. They work in conjunction with co-located application code. So testing community likes to call this the system under test, the SUT, production code. And that thing that you maybe made goes and calls some external remote service. And that can be something in the company you're in, or that could be something outside, cloudy, or from a vendor. But either way, you'd say that at times these are slow or unreliable, flaky. They're expensive if they're external and have a cost for you to utilize in a testing setup. And they might be restricted. That relates to cost, of course. The solution is to think about recording those conversations and then playing them back far more frequently than you record them. So this isn't new. There's plenty of open source and commercial technologies that do this. But I've gone ahead and made Servirtium with a view that maybe we can record these conversations into Markdown and they're easier and more debuggable, at least with your eyes, in that particular format than anything else. So the goal would be to make your test fast and reliable and free and unrestricted. And in this playback guise, the remote service is missing completely because you're just playing back from Markdown. Okay, so we need an example and we're going to use Service Virtualization of a World Bank API called Climate Data Service. And here's the API that we made. So this is in-house. We've coded this. In this case, it's in Java. The pertinent thing is the blue piece, which is a method. And you pass it 2 dates and a country code, and it will go and give you back the average rainfall for that. Turns out the World Bank has this online, and it responds with XML, and that's not what we want for our Java API in this case. So we have some logic that goes and processes the XML using Xstream and then comes back with a double, which is the millimeters, I think. Now, in itself, this is easily mockable. If we delivered this inside a company, there are many other tests we could write that would try and use Mockito to mock Climate API, and then you'd have whens and verifies around get average rainfall. But we're trying to integrate with the real deal here. So we have 5 service tests that prove that we're notionally compatible with that API. Average rainfall for GB between 1980 and 99. Same for France, same for Egypt, and then 2 that we expect to fail. One for Middle Earth, not a country, and another one for a date range that the World Bank doesn't support, but for GB, which it does support. Anyway, 3 tests are like this. We've got one line of interaction, climate API.get average rainfall. We've got an assertion in JUnit. Clearly, I've just copy-pasted the results that I calculated to this because I can't, in my head, genuinely work out what the average rainfall is for Egypt between 1980 and 1999. And then there's one line of preparation that helps Servirtium work out where the Markdown recording is going to be in the source tree, and we're going to commit that after we've recorded it. 2 tests are like this of the 5. This is the situations where we don't expect the World Bank to come back with anything useful, and we want to communicate that with the end user as an unsupported operation exception with a text payload. Anyway, there was a smarter way to do that with JUnit, but I kind of like this verbose way of doing it because it illustrates example code as well as anything else. So those 5 tests running in direct mode and passing. So the first test to run takes 1.2 seconds. The rest are ranging from 150 milliseconds up to 200. And you can see a little fragment of the XML that comes back there. So the same 5 tests running in record mode. About twice as long as direct mode. Same results, all pass. The same tests running in playback mode. Okay, much faster. That's not necessarily going to be a universal experience. You could find that the direct and the playback are as fast as each other if your service is fairly close by. But anyway, you can expect playback to be much faster than record. Much faster even than direct. Unreliability is eliminated, and you have some isolation from all of the ODS rules you might have had dealing with an external company or a vendor. So what do recordings look like? I said Markdown before, and here's an example of the source for Markdown as viewed in IntelliJ. It's pretty close to English. It's extremely popular for all markup duties these days, and in this case it's pretty easy to read in its source form. Here's the rendered form. This has been turned into HTML inside IntelliJ. And here it is looking at it on GitHub, the same resource, and I might go into it just a little bit. So first interaction 0, is a get of a URL. It had 4 request headers that went up, no request body, and off the bottom of the screen we would see the headers that came back from the service, and we'd also see the body that came back from the service, which is a lot of XML. Anyway, the first real goal for this technology, the reason for me making it, was to hit Markdown as a storage format. There are plenty of open source and commercial tools. The open source tools tend to co-locate the virtualized service recordings in source code, but they differ in how they do that, JSON and YAML being popular. The commercial solutions tend to store the recorded conversations in a database that's more central, but that's not exclusively true. And over time, I think that most will gravitate towards recordings in source control in the same way as Selenium changed that for the UI interaction community or the UI automation community 15 years ago. So one thing that's interesting from Markdown is the ability for a team to use this for conversation. You know, if the web was launched on the beauty of human readable forms with character return delimited text, then we're just taking advantage of the same thing here. Of course, if our payloads are binary, we won't have much fun looking at these in an encoded form, but if they're text and JSON or YAML or something like that, then we can see them nicely or prettily laid out inside this Markdown recording. So, but there's a second facet to why I did this, or a goal at least. There's a concept called Technology Compatibility Kits, and I believe Sun was one of the first to make those by shipping the Java test for what is Java. It's a separate thing to Java itself. Comes with a different license, plenty of complexity and legal challenges there, but they exist anyway. So if you have tests, you can say that I have made a thing that's compatible with that test, and Servirtium purports to play to that space too. And what we would do is, if we were recording some other company's stuff, or maybe they're shipping us the Servirtium recordings, we would be in a position to say we can utilize the recordings in a playback situation in our build server. So that maybe would be one build every few minutes all through the working day, and we'd expect those to stay passing unless we ourselves have broken something in our SUT or anything around that. But we really don't want the slowness or unreliability of another team service to jeopardize the ability for our tests to stay green. However, we fear we might diverge from the correctness that was once recorded. So what we need to do is have another job that is not CI, that runs and it guards the recording's accuracy. And it does that by re-recording, but it's not going to do a commit itself. That would be silly. It's going to just look for differences between the last recording and the current recording, And if those differences are significant, it's going to force a fail of the build. So this could be nightly. In production in a company I'm involved with, we're doing some weekly and some nightly. But it's a small fragment of bash at the very least for you to work into your CI server's way of working. And in this case, we're using git diff, restricting down to just a subset of the larger checkout. And then we're using a simple test to say if the string was empty, then end with a zero encode saying this was all good. And if there was a difference and that was significant, we'll spit that out in the log and we'll fail the build, and we'll hope that a human the next morning will go and investigate this. So, this in itself cannot be anything to do with CI. This is a defensive job that runs less frequency, that allows you to say that our continuous integration is good, but exposes you to new risks of timing, like if you were trying to go live 10 times a day and you're only testing your compatibility once a day, you have a lot of opportunity for putting lemons in production. But most corporates and enterprises aren't hitting that frequency and would be happy to have some warning of days or weeks ahead of a release to know that there's something potentially incompatible within a service that they're using either in-house or from vendor or cloudland. So here we go, got some links. Servirtium itself, the Java version, I need help porting it to other languages. You're going to want to have it in the language of your main application and want to run it in process. There's the climate data demo that's easily understandable, hopefully, using Servirtium as a library. There's a bunch of my blog entries on TCK, and then there's a link to my consulting practice if anyone needs me to come and help them get faster or get to trunk-based development or branch abstraction. Okay, thanks for watching.